This is the High-Stakes Lowdown, a RotoViz podcast brought to you by the Fantasy Football Players Championship. I'm Eric Balkman from the High-Stakes Fantasy Football Hour and the FFPC. You can follow me on Twitter at Eric Balkman and the FFPC on Twitter at FFPC. Before we get into the show, I want to remind everyone that you can get a listeners-only 10% discount to RotoViz by using the code RVRadio2022. That's RVRADIO2022. Your subscription gives you unlimited access to all of the RotoViz content and tools, and it supports the podcast channel. Now, without further ado, here's the latest edition of the RotoViz High-Stakes Lowdown. Welcome to 2024, everybody. So glad you made it, and we have crowned some champions in the FFPC since we last spoke. Hello, welcome, everybody, to the latest edition of the RotoViz High-Stakes Lowdown here for Tuesday, January 2nd, 2024. I'm Eric Balkman from the High-Stakes Fantasy Football Hour, the High-Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network, and, of course, the FFPC, the Fantasy Football Players Championship. And speaking of the FFPC, you can go there right now while you watch, or maybe you want to watch and then go there later. Either way is fine. myffpc.com is where to go. myffpc.com to play in the FFPC Weekly Challenge. There's no draft or salary cap for this. You're just choosing the 10 or 12 players by Saturday or Sunday's kickoff. We just have 2 weekly challenges this week because there's no Thursday night football. And then watch them pile up the points through week 18. Remember, only one player per team. $35 to enter or $200 to enter, and you can win up to $2,500. This is the exact same format as the world-famous FFPC Playoff Challenge as well. 2 great contests, same awesome format. You can get in for $200 and win $500,000. You can also get in for $35 and win up to $100,000. Same format, except for you're picking 12 players for the entire postseason. 1 player per team. Now, and I said this to Howard Bender when I was on the Fantasy Alarm in SiriusXM today, you don't know what players are going to be in the playoff challenge yet. However, I think it's important to get those entries squared away. Make sure you have them in. Both of these contests are already more than 10% full, which is not normal for this time of year. We're not even to week 18 games yet. We're already 10% full on these. So I would encourage everybody to get over there now, get your teams lined up. Fill in the rosters later at myffpc.com, myffpc.com. Remember to like this video, subscribe to the channel, comment, share, and get notified anytime we go live like we are tonight this evening. I want to welcome in my guest tonight. Many of you know him. Many of you have competed against him, and quite frankly, many of you have probably lost in leagues to this guy over the years. He finished 17th place in the FFPC main event this year. I believe at a top 100 team in the FantasyPros Championship as well. He's going to join me tonight to look back on a big run for $1 million that ultimately fell just short. 16 teams finished ahead of him. We'll talk about the rest of his FFPC teams, how they fared this season, maybe a little look ahead to 2024 as well. From the Mongooses franchise, it is the incomparable Mike Zucca. Mike, welcome in tonight, man.
Hey, Eric. Yeah, thanks for having me.
Happy New Year. You said it's a good New Year because your Cleveland Browns and Joe Flacco, they're already in the playoffs. So for the playoff challenge, you know you're picking one Brown. You just don't know which one it's gonna be yet.
Yeah, this one, defense.
That's gonna be the defense. There you go. But what tremendous work for them this year. I had actually 2 of my leagues, Mike. I was racking my brain the majority of the season because I had the Browns and Jets defenses on my team, and I had to figure out which one to play week to week. It was a tough one, but man, Myles Garrett and that Browns defense, Jim Schwartz too, right? What a job he's done in Cleveland this year.
Yeah, I mean, everything. I mean, yeah. We should have the coach of the year. We should have the defensive player of the year, comeback player of the year, everything. I mean,
and then maybe Super Bowl MVP too. You never know. Anything's possible. Coming up tonight, Mike and I are going to try to figure out how we let Kyron Williams slip so far in drafts, where David Njoku, speaking of the Browns, stands among the elite tight ends next year, what to expect from Devon Achane in 2024, and much more. So, Mike, the first question I want to lead off with tonight is quite simply, how was your season go? How did your season end up overall? I know you play a ton of leagues. I mean, the FFPC alone, you're in the main event, you're in the Fantasy Pros Championship, you're in the bare knuckle, which we're going to get into in a little bit. You did, I think, varsity, big payback, a ton of the high-end leagues. Overall, how good was your fantasy season in 2023?
I mean, good, but not great. I was kind of disappointed. Really wanted the bare knuckles and kind of fell flat the last 2 weeks of the season there.
For the bare knuckle, well, I'll tell you what, let's hold off on the bare knuckle. Let's talk about the main event. I don't know, because you're in so many leagues, I don't know how you scoreboard watch, if you're scoreboard watching in week 17, but you ended up getting a team into 17th place overall in the main event. And this was a team, I believe, I could be wrong, I thought it put up like 200 points in the final week. So it obviously was climbing up the leaderboard. Were you watching it as the games went on in week 17 saying, oh my God, I'm climbing here? Like, what was that like? And did you feel like you had a chance when you saw that team rising?
I thought I had a chance halfway through the Pittsburgh-Seattle game. I just needed Jalen Warren and DK Metcalf to do more than they did.
And that was ultimately the difference, is Warren and Metcalf just could not get it done.
I mean, they had good games, but I needed them to have great games. And
right, yeah.
I was only up to about 12th place with nobody left to go in the.
Okay, I got it. So first place was never really a threat, but it was still pretty cool seeing your team rise up, though.
Yeah. I had 3 teams in the main event playoffs, and each one of them had one bad week, and I had one that finished 17th, one that finished 45th, one that finished 152nd.
And that's the thing, like, because like now with this sprint, like you so many teams that like you pretty much got to be dialing into like 180, 190, 200 every single week, right?
Yeah, and so the one that came close, I had 130 in week 16, so I thought that team was done, and then it had Breece Hall in the Thursday night game, so yeah.
Oh, and Breece Hall, Mike, what is he like? This has been insane watching this guy. One of my leagues, I benched him in week 16. This is okay. So nobody cares about your team, but this is what I'm facing here. I play in Kentucky, where you can only start 3 running backs. Breece Hall, Devon Achane, Travis Etienne, Kyron Williams, and Isaiah Pacheco were my 5. And I ended up in week 16 sitting Breece Hall. And I didn't even, I mean, like the way that, as far as how many passes he was catching, just blew me away. And I think that'll change next year if Aaron Rodgers is the quarterback. But my goodness, what he did for people these last couple weeks of the season, absolutely insane.
Yeah, and I mostly missed out on him because I was worried about the injury, and kind of bought into the Dalvin Cook, hype.
Right. Yeah, and that's like, I like Breece Hall, but then when you've been doing this for years, like once a guy reaches a certain level, it's really tough to get sold on the player when you have to pay that premium price. And Hall was one of those guys for me this year. Sounds like he was one of those guys for you as well. Yeah,
I mean, I got him in that team because he fell to the 6th round. That's
Otherwise, you never would have grabbed him. Like it's just that's the way it works. Okay, let's talk about Kyron Williams, who was also on this team that finished in 17th overall. You grabbed him in the 16th round. Now, I know that the obvious reasons that we let him slip so far was the fact that Cam Akers was there, the fact that Kyron Williams was a backup at best to start the season. We didn't even know if he was going to be the number 2. I mean, I think like as drafting season went on, we kind of thought he was going to be, and he was catching passes and preseason and what have you. But Mike, I think that the lesson we have to learn from Kyron Williams here, how do we avoid making sure, a better way to phrase this, how do we make sure we don't let players that put up these kinds of numbers slip so far in drafts next year? Is it just a matter of like, look, this is what happens in high stakes leagues. These injury away type guys are always going to go in the double-digit rounds. You just got to hope you get the right one. Or is it more nuanced? Can we kind of figure out like, okay, maybe I should be targeting these guys a couple of rounds earlier to make sure I have them on my team?
No, I mean, I almost completely missed out on Kyron Williams. I was, in August, July and August, I was worried about Zach Evans. I thought he was going to be the backup, and then,
I think
actually it didn't come until later, until I saw people better than me at this who were drafting Kyron Williams every draft. And so I went into Vegas saying, I need to draft Kyron Williams in every league, and I came close to that in the last couple of days of drafting. But yeah.
And that's the thing. Like, so I do that all the time because so many people I compete against are way smarter than me. But you, a guy who has had so much success in the FFPC, you do the same thing. Where if you've seen players and you've competed against players and they're grabbing these guys, then you're automatically adjusting your rankings based on what what you view as more talented players are doing.
Yeah, I mean, I in August, I go through my rankings every day and I change it, based on players I have, things I've seen. So that's kind of how I can memorize things for bare knuckles, is that I redo my rankings every day.
How long is that daily process during drafting season? How long does that take for you to re-rank?
Oh, it's I mean, probably 20, 30 minutes, but yeah.
Okay. And are you going position by position, or are you doing like a top 100, or how do you do that?
Position by position, yeah. So I have every team's depth chart up, and I kind of move people around based on preseason news, and yeah.
So I'm waking up in the morning. I have my coffee. I make breakfast. I'm getting ready for work. You wake up in the morning during the summer. You have your coffee, and then okay. I got to move Devon A. up here. I got to move Travis Etienne. Like, this is what your morning is during drafting season, basically.
Yeah. If I get up early enough, that's what I do.
Unbelievable.
Because I'm in a draft right after work, so yeah, I have to do it in the morning.
Right. How many are you in a bunch of slow drafts at once during the summer too?
I never do slow drafts.
Now, why is that? Why do you not participate in slow drafts?
I mean, I'm not patient enough, and I mean, it's
so it's not a strategic thing. It's just not enjoyable for you,
right?
Yeah, I know people like for me, I commish like a ton of drafts, and I'm busy in the summer or whatever, and it's really difficult for me to set aside 2 hours or an hour and a half or whatever it is, or sometimes an hour to do a live draft. So I love the slow drafts because I can only check in every so often. But I've heard from people, and I think, Mike, you're one of these people I'm going to add to the list now, cannot stand it when they check in at 9 a.m. and they're 6 picks away, and then they check in at 3 p.m. and they're still 6 picks away. Like, just drives people batty.
Well, yeah, and then I'm done with the draft. As soon as it's over, I don't have to think about a draft for 2 weeks. I do my draft, I'm done with it, move on to the next one,
and you it's I mean, that's a process for you, like, because once you get a draft done, it's just part of your stats, and you're moving on to the next one. You're re-ranking every day, and I feel like that you probably developed a lot of unique builds that way too, with all the drafts that you did this summer.
Not really. I mean, yeah.
No,
my teams end up kind of the same, just by positions. I kind of vary the players a lot. I mean, I looked at my ownership percentages. One player over 20%. That was the Cleveland Browns defense. No player above 20% on my list. So
what was it about the Browns defense this year? I mean, I guess it was probably just a combination of things, right?
Well, they're always my top owned player. I just can't help that. But,
and it helps that they have a lot of talent there too.
Yeah, kind of had an easier schedule this year, and they've actually been kind of disappointing for fantasy because they just don't allow a lot of yards and points. But
let's talk about the bare knuckle now. I know last time we had you on the HSFFO where we talked about this a lot. Nick Costantino, the back-to-back, or what part of the back-to-back FFPC main event guys, Go Bills, Marv Levy franchise. Tough loss in bare knuckle. You had it the whole way. You kind of alluded to this a little bit earlier, Mike. Now, I listened to the Deep End Fantasy Football podcast. I've heard Mike Shope. Mike Shope has actually come on some of my shows, and he's mentioned your name. Has nothing but praise for you about how good you are, not only for how good you have done in the bare knuckle, but it seems like how good you seem to do in the bare knuckle every single year. You were second place this year, very, very close to first place overall. And you would attribute a lot of that success to re-ranking players, to drafting a lot. How have you been able to be up at the top of the leaderboard seemingly every year you participate in this draft?
Yeah, well, I mean, and I'm crazy. I do memorize all the players, and I could, right before the draft, I could probably go 100 players deep at every position,
Wow.
just off the top of my head. But really, the important thing is I have my strategy down for best ball drafts. I always, usually always go, 3, 7, 8, 4, 3, 3 with my positions, and I kind of know where to take kickers and defenses, know where to take my fourth running back, where to take my third quarterback. And, so I have that all down, so I don't have to worry about that. I can kind of concentrate on memorizing players, knowing who's dropped. And,
Now, for the people who are watching this right now or listening to it later, if you're not familiar with the bare knuckle, this is a 28-round draft. It is a live draft done in Las Vegas right after that opening Thursday night game. No electronics, no pens, no paper, nothing allowed on the table in front of you. It's just you, and you only get 30 seconds to make a pick. Now, Mike, as you know, this leads to some crazy stuff happening in the draft. Can you tell me about one player over the years that you couldn't believe was still out there that was a huge score for you? And is it, conversely, was there another time when you're like, you took a kicker too early, or you took a player like 3 rounds early and you're like, oh, I can't believe I just did that. Like basically your best and worst pick in your bare knuckle history, or the ones that you remember at least. And you cannot,
the year I won it was Austin Eckler in the 3rd round. That was he was going in the 1st round. That was probably my best pick.
Why?
Not to sound full of myself. I don't think I made any bad picks. Just based on like memory, I've forgotten about players. I've forgotten about plenty of players.
Okay.
This last year, I let Cooper Kupp pass me a couple of times. Cooper Kupp went in the end of the 7th round to the guy who won it. So that might have cost me the league, but I just, completely forgot about him. And
so getting back to the Eckler one, where he fell 2 rounds without explanation, and you see he's still out there and you're on the clock. Are you thinking like, did he get hurt today? And I don't know about this. Like why because 2 rounds at the top of the draft. I mean, that's a huge deal, Mike.
What I've seen is when there's news about a guy, people will decide to fade him. He did have that hamstring injury. Okay. And with Cooper Kupp, this year, I think he just went on IR, that day. So people would say, well, I'm going to fade Cooper Kupp, and then they just forget about him. Yes. And
have you ever done like a $35 FFPC draft, like a bare knuckle, where you're just like, all right, I'm going to join this draft, and you don't have to do it bare knuckle style, but you're so dialed in. Have you ever done a draft like that?
I could. I've never tried to do that.
But you could if you wanted to.
I'd be at a disadvantage, I think, if I did that.
It probably would be. Yes. I'm moving on here. Let's talk about Darren Waller, a player that I think you had a lot of shares of this year, and a player that was really climbing up draft boards at the end of drafting season. And a lot of people were very excited about what he was going to do in New York because they didn't have a lot of reliable receivers or any reliable receivers. And then lo and behold, the soft tissue injury, the soft tissue bug rears its ugly head and it bites Darren Waller again. Comes back at the end of this year, does okay. But my question to you is, and we're going to have in the FFPC draft starting up in just a couple of weeks here with the Never Too Early Best Ball Tournament, which I think you can actually sign up for right now. But Darren Waller, do you think that players going to let him go so far as to maybe like, oh my God, I can get Darren Waller as the 14th, 15th tight end off the board? I'm all over that. Do you think he's going to be a value in drafts this year, Mike?
I'm probably out on him. I kind of bought into the training camp hype with him, and you could make a case for him. He didn't have Daniel Jones a whole year, and he could happen, but he's 31 years old now.
And especially, and I think the other thing too, well, I guess what makes this interesting is like, I'm not a Waller guy, but I think about the tight end position this coming year. And I think it's going to be fascinating because you're going to have Kelsey another year older, who is really kind of fading down the stretch. Mark Andrews, who's coming off a serious knee injury. TJ Hawkinson, we don't know when he's coming back or if he's even coming back. I mean, if the Vikings stink it up in 2024, maybe Hawkinson doesn't even, play next year at all. we're going to be dealing with that. And then that's not even taken into consideration all the young guys, the Trey McBrides, the Sam Laportas, Dalton Kincaids, Michael Mayer, Luke Musgrave, all these guys that have really come on this year that historically we don't see, rookies or young guys. I know McBride's not a rookie, but we don't normally see guys putting up these types of numbers at this age in the NFL. I think that's going to be fascinating. If all those guys move up, then all of a sudden Waller, I guess I would look at Waller as a second tight end, maybe in a best ball. But even then, you think it's too risky.
Yeah, if he's in the 10th round, yes, I'll take him there. Okay. But
he's not a target for you. I totally get it. I totally get it. I'm trying to get you to say I love Darren Waller, and I'm just not going to get you to say that.
No, he had one good year 4 years ago, and we've been chasing it for the last 3 years now.
It's true. Chasing Waller, the title of the episode. David Njoku, let's talk about one of your Cleveland Browns here. This is a guy that I ended up flexing out in a couple of my leagues, like non-tight end premium, and worked out for me down the stretch in a couple of my leagues this year. Now, I think that the interesting thing, and I'll get you to weigh in on this because I don't know what Cleveland's going to do. What Joe Flacco's been able to come off the couch and the numbers he's been able to put up is truly mind-blowing. And Cooper had that awesome week. And Njoku's been crushing it. Elijah Moore's actually been all right, too. I'm wondering what you think. Number one, what are the Browns going to do at quarterback next year? Is it just as simple as, hey, Watson's healthy, he's our starter? And then number two, where does Njoku fall in on, I just laid out the tight end landscape. Where does Njoku fall in on that landscape for you, Mike?
I'd say he's, tight end 5 or 6. I'll be, The only concern is just usage. I just don't know if he'll be he'll get the same number of targets with Deshaun Watson back next year. I think we have to go back to Deshaun Watson next year.
All that money.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the fascinating thing is what happens, and I think that as good as Baltimore has been playing lately, I still think the league's wide open as far as the playoffs go this year. And now does Cleveland, they have the 5th seed locked up, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So they will be playing on the road. No, they will not. Yeah, they'll be playing on the road against the 4 seed in the first round. Like, what happens if Flacco leads them to the AFC Championship or the Super Bowl? I mean, that is compelling stuff in Cleveland. If that happens, then all of a sudden, and I guess you can't trade Watson. I mean, you got to play him. Even if Flacco wins the Super Bowl, you got to play Watson next year, right?
Yeah. If Flacco was 28 instead of 38, yeah.
Right. Then we'd be having a different conversation. Yeah. Age is such a weird thing in the NFL. We saw Tom Brady go deep into his mid-40s. Aaron Rodgers, I think, wants to keep doing what he's doing until his mid-40s. I don't know if he'll get that far. And then you have running backs that, the shelf life on their careers is over in a blip. Many of them not even getting second contracts. I can't include Raheem Mostert in that conversation because this dude has gotten a second contract and a third contract. And now at 31 years old has a 20-plus touchdown year on his resume thanks to what he did in Miami this year. I don't believe he's going to do it next year. He's going to be 32 years old. Might be a complimentary piece in that Miami backfield. But to me, the meal ticket and the guy that everybody's going to be falling all over themselves to draft is Devon Achane. Mike, where do you think I shouldn't say where do you think? Where would you be comfortable drafting Devon Achane next year after, fill in the blank, after X many running backs are off the board? Where do you like him next year? We saw the good, we saw the bad with him, though, this year as well.
I'd say about 4th or 5th.
Fourth or fifth round.
McCaffrey ahead of him. I take Hall ahead of him. Probably would take Bijan ahead of him too.
Okay.
But everybody else is old. I can't really get excited about Saquon Barkley or Austin Eckler next year. I'd love to see Nick Chubb run it back, but I'm not going to draft him in the first round.
Right. What about?
I think Mostert will be annoying next year. That's you'll see. Yeah, it'll be like Jamal Charles. 12 years ago where he would run for 70 yards and they bring in Thomas Jones for a 1-yard touchdown. Right. You'll see that next year.
Yeah. So Devon Achane, not 4th, 5th round. You're talking about 4th, 5th overall. So you're talking about
probably end of the first round.
End of the first, early second.
It's going to be the first round's going to be all yellow next year. I mean, it's going to be mostly receivers. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. So that'll probably be 1-2 turn about where I would take him.
I think he's going to be compelling. I'll be here for it. I'd love to see where Achane's going to go. And he was a success story, I think, for the most part this year because of what you had to give up in your draft to get him. You weren't drafting him in the 1st, 2nd, 3rd round, anything like that. A guy who was not a success story this year, and this is a guy that was really moving up high stakes draft boards the last week of August, the first week of September, Mike, was Jahan Dotson in Washington. And I think he's an interesting case to look at this year because he was on a team that for the majority, I shouldn't say the majority of the season, I would say a little over half the season a little over halfway into the 2023 season, Sam Howell was leading the league in passing yards, which is crazy. But Jahan Dotson was the number 2 receiver on that team behind Terry McLaurin. I know Curtis Samuel was there and Logan Thomas, so on and so forth as well. But Dotson really did not do much at all. Is there any lesson that we can learn from a player like Dotson who we had such high hopes for, the way he was climbing up draft boards, but ultimately let us down on a passing offense that really didn't let us down?
Well, First, I think we overreacted to Terry McLaurin's injury. I always say, turf toe is tough to overcome. But he didn't win anybody any leagues, but he was soaking up all the targets, and we kind of overestimated that. We were assuming that Dotson would be the number 1 receiver, and
right.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I would change my process at all. I mean, because you want to take guys with high upside, and they're not going to all pan out, and
like how many years have you been playing fantasy football? I mean, this has got to be like 20 something, right? For you?
No, actually, my first home league was in 2007.
2007. Okay, so you're looking at you're looking at what 15, 16, right? Yeah. Somewhere around there. And you say you trust your process. You haven't changed your process. You've had to. You've tweaked
not my process. I mean, but it's you want to chase upside, and if you.
But so like over the year, like I should ask you this. What percentage of the leagues do you play in, Mike, where it's best ball, and what percentage of the teams that you draft are managed leagues? Is it like 50-50? Is it a different split?
Well, it's more best ball because they're it's lower buy-in. So across all the sites, I had 90 managed teams this year, which is too many. I'm going to probably try to do about half that next year.
Okay. All right. Well, if you change your mind, we here at the FFPC won't be upset if you want to get it back up into the 80 or 90 range. That's totally fine. Okay, let's talk about this, Mike. A player that you really got right this year, whether it was a player that had a stellar season and you drafted him on a bunch of teams, and you can't say the Browns defense for this because we know you got that right, but a player that had a Bafo season, went crazy, everybody wanted him, you got him on a lot of teams, or it could be a player that had a terrible season and you really avoided. Was there one player that you really got right this year?
Probably the one that stands out to me most is Amon-Ra St. Brown. He was a guy on three main event teams with him out of 6 that had him, and those were the 3 teams that made the playoffs. And so by drafting him, I avoided Stephon Diggs, I avoided AJ Brown. Kind of the guy I missed out on was CeeDee Lamb, and if I would have replaced Amon-Ra with CeeDee Lamb, I'd be $500,000 richer. But it was really that was the guy that I could count on my lineups every week this year.
Is there so you had the choice you said you're 3 out of your 6. Did you have the choice in all 3 to take St. Brown or Lamb?
Yes.
Okay. Now, I want to phrase this the right way. You took St. Brown over Lamb in all three. Why was that the case? And if you had to look back on it, would you have, I mean, obviously you would have changed it because of the results, but when we rather trust the process than results, right? So if you had to do it over again, would you have still taken St. Brown over Lamb? And if you didn't know the results?
Yeah, well, I mean, I had St. Brown in a tier ahead of those guys, so I was. But yeah, there was a draft. I did a main event draft on the airport. Waiting for my flight back from Vegas. I had the 7th pick. That was the one where after I took St. Brown again there, and that was the one where I was thinking, well, maybe I should have taken CeeDee Lamb because I don't have him, and yeah.
So, but I mean, like, what was it about? Was it just the consistency? Was it the offense? The reliability of knowing that things were a little bit more consistent, remaining constant from 2022 that had you picking St. Brown over Lamb? What was it that ultimately sold you on St. Brown over Lamb in all three drafts?
Well, I mean, we had the Thursday night game, and I could see that, he was the main focus of the offense, and it was going to run through him. It sounds silly now, but I was worried about Dak in Dallas, and yeah.
Well, I mean, here's the thing. I know I talked about this a lot in August. Kellen Moore moved on from Dallas and immediately got scooped up by the Chargers. And I was like, oh, here we go. Let wheels up for the Chargers this year with Kellen Moore, Herbert, Allen, Williams, Johnston, Joshua Palmer, Eckler. I mean, all those guys. I was loving the Chargers. I was not sold on the Cowboys either because they brought in another guy that loved to run the football. And at that point, I'm like, well, okay, I mean, are we going to see a huge year from CeeDee Lamb? Are we going to see a huge year from Dak Prescott in this offense? Now, we ended up seeing both those guys have career years. But at the same time, you said it. It seems silly now. But back then, I think it was definitely logical to pass on him.
Well, yeah, and also, Tony Pollard was a thing. I mean,
right.
He was supposed to take at least some of what CeeDee Lamb got, but they didn't go to Pollard at all in the passing game.
No, and that was I mean, I know Dave Turp, who co-hosts a lot of the draft coverage that we do here in the FFPC. He said last year, he's like, if they ever get rid of Elliott, Pollard might be the number 1 overall fantasy running back. And I said, slow your role player. But I said, well, there's a non-zero chance of it. And then for whatever reason, it didn't happen this year. Now, Pollard also said a couple of weeks ago, and you never know if he's just saying this or if it's true, or maybe a little bit of both. But he said, like, look, I didn't realize how bad I hurt myself last year, and I'm just now starting to feel like I'm at full strength again. So I kind of get it from Pollard's angle, too, because that was a pretty significant injury. I did not draft Pollard anywhere. I don't think I did. No, I did not have any Pollard this year. Just too rich for my blood. I did not want to pay that price to get him on my team. And I was happy about it. But there are other guys I totally whiffed on this year that I should have had on my team, or that I drafted too much of, and they ultimately sucked, especially down the stretch. Mike, was there anybody this year that you were like, if you had to do it over again, you would have gotten a lot more shares of this guy, or that you wish you wouldn't have drafted so much?
Okay. A guy that I completely missed on was Rachaad White. I kind of didn't like what I saw last year. So I was drafting all the backups. I was drafting Sean Tucker a lot. I was drafting Chase Edmonds, even picked up Keyshawn Vaughn on waivers a couple places. And yeah, that was kind of one that I did not see coming at all. Completely missed it. Didn't have any of him. Then a guy that I drafted too much, I don't know how I ended up with so much of him, but I seem to have Miles Sanders on way too many teams. And I think it was just kind of a mistake I made in my rankings. I just, had him 1 or 2 spots too high, and he ended up being the top guy on my list too many times. I didn't move him down when people were fading him, and yeah, it was kind of neutral on him, but I had, a ton of him.
When did you realize that you're like, oh my God, I cannot believe how much Sanders I have this year? Was it like mid-August, late August?
Yeah, when I was sitting in the varsity draft on Saturday, my last live draft. I was maybe should have gone with Kamara or
Right.
James Conner or Rashad White and any of those guys. But I was always coming back to Miles Sanders and
Well, it's good to hear that a guy with so much success like you is still missing on picks and missing on them multiple times. Makes me feel better about it. You're still way more successful than I'll ever be. So congratulations on a good season. I know it wasn't the season you wanted, not getting that $1 million grand prize, but still a tremendous season. We'll look ahead to 2024 here with this last question, Mike. I know it's very difficult because we don't know where these players are going to land. Free agency still has to happen, the NFL draft. And, oh, by the way, the rest of the NFL season in 2023 and the postseason. So much can happen. But is there a player – I know you already said you're out on Darren Waller this coming season. Is there another player you're probably going to be out on? And then conversely, a player that you're like, man, I really want to get this guy in a lot of drafts next year.
Okay, a player that I'm nervous about, I'm not saying I'm going to be out on him. I'm a little bit nervous about Tyreek Hill next year. He's just kind of want to be a year early rather than a year late on getting out on him. He's carried a bunch of teams this year, but he's faded down the stretch now 3 years in a row where he's kind of disappointed in the playoff weeks. And I still want to draft some of him, but I'm a little bit nervous about him just because he's getting older, and maybe A-Chan will take more of his his snaps, his touches. Then kind of more of a team that I'm interested in next year is Cincinnati. Just their whole passing game. Just interested in seeing them bounce back. I think Joe Burrow could be a target next year. And I think he'll come back fully healthy next year, and he could be a target. If people are nervous about them.
Do you think that because Burrow will probably fall because of the injury a little bit? Chase. I guess we don't know if Higgins is going to be back. Is there going to be any kind of first-round discount on Jamar Chase next year?
I don't think there will be, but I'm going to be drafting him anyway. I'm going to be wherever he falls, I'll probably take him. I'm not going to take him number 1 overall. I guess coming out of the draft season, he was one guy that I risked. Felt bad about not getting more of.
Right.
He was the one guy I completely missed out. Felt like I had too much Jefferson, not enough Chase, but it didn't matter in the end. But
So now that we have reached we have the FFPC Playoff Challenge coming up, before we get into the thick of drafting season. When do you start your drafting process? Are you drafting early in January, February, March? Do you wait till after the NFL draft? How do you normally handle it, Mike?
I'll probably hold off on drafting until either the Browns win the Super Bowl or they get eliminated. That's probably when I'll start. In the past, I've jumped into the first slow draft, but I'll probably wait until one of the $35 live drafts fills. And usually the last couple of years it's filled. We've had one in February. I'll probably be in that one.
Now, what is it about that early draft that you like trying to get into that first one every year? Is it just sort of like fun and kitschy? Are you learning anything out of that? Why do you like to be in that first one?
I just don't like playing catch up. So I don't like having other people be ahead of me. And so I want to,
I think it is going to be a good year for you next year. It was already a good year for you in 2023, Mike. I think 2024 holds good things in store for you as well. And hopefully, listen, I'm a Packers guy, so whatever happens in the AFC happens in the AFC. I'm more than happy to be willing to root for your Cleveland Browns in the playoffs. In fact, I think I have in the past too. They're a very likable franchise to me, a good fan base. So I will rally everybody here in Northeast Wisconsin to root for your Cleveland Browns. To march to the AFC. I'd much rather see them in the Super Bowl over, Kansas City or Buffalo or anybody like that, especially Kansas City. I don't need to see the Chiefs in another Super Bowl, that's for sure. And Mike, hopefully next year will be the year that you're cashing that 7-figure grand prize in either the main event or the Fantasy Pros Championship. We will continue to follow you on the X machine at Mike Zucca. Thank you so much, my friend. This was a lot of fun. Thanks for sitting in with me on this Tuesday night. Go Browns and enjoy the rest of the NFL season, man.
Appreciate it. Yeah, thanks, Eric.
You got it. That's Mike Zucca, ladies and gentlemen, the 17th place finisher in the FFPC main event a guy who has won numerous other best ball leagues this year as well. FantasyPros Championship, FFPC main event. He's done it all. And always good to have him on. If you've ever seen him, or if you've ever seen mongooses in your league, it's more than likely Mike Zucca, who has had a really nice career here at the FFPC over the course of 10 plus years. So that will complete tonight's show. And I do have some news for you before I let you go tonight. Number one, we will be live next Tuesday at 10 o'clock on the RotoViz High-Stakes Lowdown. Already have 2 guests booked for that show, and it's going to be our annual FFPC World Famous Playoff Challenge preview show. Well, who better to get on than 2 of the 4 guys who won the $500,000 last year? So Judd Rosengart, Phil Orban, who were 2 of the $500,000 winners last year, along with Steven Aarons and Tim Hall. They will be joining me next Tuesday as we will build. I'm going to try to get them to build a roster on air. I don't know if we'll be able to get them to, but we'll try. But it will be your perfect prep for getting your playoff challenge roster set. So that will be next Tuesday's show right here at 10 p.m. Now, this Thursday, High Stakes Fantasy Football Show will go live on the Better Sports Network at 7 o'clock. We'll go all the way up until 9 o'clock. Billy Musio from Player Profiler, and another longtime FFPC player, very successful one. He's going to share what he learned from this season with a look ahead to 2024 drafting and the playoff challenge. That will be Thursday on all the FFPC socials, as well as the Better Sports Network at 7 o'clock. Friday night, this is the big one. Farrell Elliott and myself, 10 o'clock Eastern time, will be joined by the 2023 FFPC main event $1 million winner Teague Orgeman will be joining us on the show. And I will ask him the proper way to pronounce his name. That's be my first question before I ask him what he's going to do with that $1 million. But he's going to join us. Very exciting show for you lined up on Friday. And then the following Friday, we are going to have the FantasyPros Championship $1 million winner Brendan Gobert will join us. So literally back-to-back $1 million winners. Never happened on the HSFF Hour ever, but it's going to be happening this coming Friday and then next Friday. So Teague will join us this Friday, and then Brendan will join us the following Friday on January 12th. So go to myffpc.com, myffpc.com right now to play in that FFPC Weekly Challenge. We got the Saturday Challenge for you, the Sunday Challenge for you. $35 price point, $200 price point. You can win up to $2,500. And then don't forget about the world famous FFPC Playoff Challenge. Register for that right now. $200 entry fee will get you in the running for a $500,000 grand prize. You can enter for $35 as well and still be eligible for a $100,000 grand prize as well. $200 or $35 to enter, whichever one you want to do. Make sure you're signing up right now, and we'll have plenty of content coming up over the next couple of weeks on the FFPC family of podcasts that will show you the way from people who have done it before, who have won a lot of money before, $500,000 before, to tell you what they're doing this year, what they recommend that you should be doing this year. Remember to like this video, subscribe to the channel, comment on it, share it with your friends and enemies, and then get notified by clicking on that bell. So you'll know every time we go live with $1 million winner or another $1 million winner or a $500,000 winner. It's the season of champions here on the FFPC podcast, FFPC Media, and it will continue Thursday night. Billy Musio on the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show with me. Thank you to Mike Zucca. Thank you to everybody watching, listening, streaming. Appreciate it. We'll be back on this show 10 o'clock on Tuesday. We'll be back on these airwaves at 7 o'clock Eastern time on Thursday night with Billy Musio. Happy New Year, everybody. We'll talk to you on Thursday. Thank you for listening to the High Stakes Lowdown, a RotoViz podcast brought to you by the Fantasy Football Players Championship. And thanks to Grapes for our theme music. Please review the podcast on iTunes under the RotoViz radio feed. It helps us find new listeners. Contact us via email, rotovizradio@gmail.com. We'd love to hear what you think, and follow us on Twitter at RotoVizRadio. And remember, you can always support the show by subscribing to RotoViz at a 10% discount through the NFL podcast homepage, rotoviz.com/podcast.